You will regret it later if you neglect body parts early on in your training. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And what's funny is that I see it on the different extremes. Of course, I started off early with big basic exercises. So for me, I was originally taught, to train legs. I did rows, I did pull-ups, all that stuff. So for me, legs and back and everything were trained from day one. Okay, and I used to train arms and focus a little on bodybuilding some when I was younger, personally. But then later I got into training. I lost everything when I got sick. I had to learn to walk again, rebuild from scratch, and I really neglected my arms a lot in the pursuit of sometimes minimalist training, sometimes, all the powerlifting, so things like the long head of my tricep got neglected. My biceps got neglected. I had entire years, even, while I was doing YouTube and stuff, where my only bicep work was rows, occasionally some pull-ups. I did heavy chins for a while, but they didn't make my biceps grow, right? They really didn't. Like when I was super strong, even at weighted chins at one time, I still had lacking biceps, but I didn't make that big of a deal about it because I had big back and legs and I was strong and all that stuff, and now for me personally, I'm just using myself as an example because I've seen this with other people. For me, now my arms are lagging, and a lot of people are like, well, you've caught them up a lot. I have, but realistically, they're still the weakest link overall in my physique now that I'm working on my physique more. And I've been trimming down, getting leaner, all those things. So that, and then things like side rear delts need a little more work. And I think they go to show that sometimes you can't just use some big compounds to build everything. Because I've been really strong at weighted chins in the past. Okay? Weight, and then pull-ups, definitely. Always been good at pull-ups. Look at the back they gave me, yet my rear delts didn't quite grow in proportion to my lats. My biceps didn't grow in proportion to all of it. Like it wasn't enough. Hey, it wasn't enough to get the job done. Okay? So accordingly, I'm now having to play catch up. And, and it was interesting a while back, I was actually at a gym not long ago with a bunch of bodybuilding guys, a lot of gym bros, a lot of guys on gear. And, the general thing I noticed, I had on average a better physique than the majority of them. Yet a lot of them had bigger arms than me, okay? And I want to be clear there. I literally saw guys in a room, in the weight room, stopping at people who I had a wider back than them, bigger V-taper, okay? Smaller waist probably, bigger legs. Yet some of them had 2 or 3 inches of arm on me, I bet. Their bicep measurements were flat out bigger, and their whole arm was bigger. And I think that also shows some structural differences in terms of frames and all those things, right? See those structural differences because I have long arms and all that. So, you see those differences and go, man, even though I might overall have a more impressive physique, just way more put together than those guys, they still had better arms than me. Some of them had better shoulders than me. And I noticed it. Okay, I noticed it. But then you'd watch some of them train, and some of them were in there just training the crap out of their arms. It's like, man. And I think, what was funny, it reminded me of something I saw Dave Tate say. He's like, look, you can write whatever you want. But he goes, look, you already know these kids are going to come in, they're going to just pump the shit out of their arms. No matter what program you give them. And he's right. He's right, man. These kids just pump the crap out of their arms. And you look at it and go, as a coach, you look at it and go, man, if you were doing that with any other muscle group, you guys would be so injured and so beat up. But I noticed that. It's been a long time since I've been in a gym. And I'm reminded of how hard guys will train their arms. They'll train their arms as hard as a top level powerlifter trains his deadlift. Right? Fascinating. Watching dudes do arms with triple drop sets with bands, doing 4 reps with bands and stuff on preacher curl bench, and then doing 4 reps and having someone help them, and then they get done taking a set of bands and just using them to finish it. Jesus Christ. But then they all had big arms. You know, they all had big arms. But the thing that, you don't train, it's going to lag and you're going to notice it. There's going to come a point one day where you go, man, I should have done a better job there. And it's the same for you guys who skip your legs. Okay? Same for you guys who skip your legs or you skip your back. You're like, oh, I don't need to do any lats. And then you don't have a big V-taper. You're lacking. You're lacking. It's the same even for a lot of women who don't train their upper body. A lot of guys who don't train their lower body, they don't train their legs. Okay? You look good maybe at certain angles, but people will notice. And in my case, absolutely. I mean, in a normal environment, I walk down the street, I actually get compliments on my arms. It's funny. But in a hardcore lifting circle, it's very obvious that they're lacking. Even though I might have overall, my back and stuff really gets me a lot of attention. My legs, my calves. But we all know my arms still need more work. My worst body part. And it's not genetics per se. It's because I simply undertrained them for too many years while pushing the limits of the other stuff. Because I realized even for my powerlifting purposes, like, man, I better train the hell out of my back. And I have good back genetics. Okay, so let's be clear. I am not genetically normal guy in terms of back. Freakish backs are kind of normal in my family for anyone who lifts. It's like lower back to even erectors. All right? Everyone in my family who lifts heavy has a big deadlift. All right? So, and I have longer arms, and I have a thinner frame. I've got a pretty wide collarbone, but my frame itself is not that thick. Okay, notice I don't have big wrists and stuff. Okay, so that combination, I do have to work a little harder for arms already. And then by undertraining them, you don't get that balance. Same for a lot of you guys who do legs. And you're like, oh, I'll play catch up later. But then when you've neglected them, like what happens when that later is 10 years later? And then you're 8 or 10 years ahead on the rest of your body versus your legs. And I've had to deal with it with clients. The same thing. One of my clients who, we started powerlifting, and he actually could bench 315. He could do like 12 pull-ups, 15 pull-ups actually. He did tons of them in the Marines. He couldn't squat 315 yet. A decent deadlift. Okay, and up till now, we actually got him to a 375 squat here for his second meet, but he couldn't even squat 315. And then, next week we can get him into the 400s. But he's playing catch-up. But realistically, how long of a catch-up do you need? He's needing a really long one. Hey, so I would tell people just as soon as you realize or see a video like this, realize you need to just start training everything. Trust me on this. You will probably regret it one day if you don't.